Okay guys, I think we are live now. Please let me know if you can see me and hear me. And let me know if the picture is clear, because I have some warning from YouTube that YouTube is not receiving video data at a fast enough rate. So if you can clearly see what it says on the screen in my Photoshop, if you can see me, let me know in the chat. So again, because I see that we have more people now online, please let me know if you can see me and clearly hear what I say, because YouTube says that, well, now it says actually that the stream is a good quality, so you should hear me and see me well. I hope so. Let me know in the chat, please. How is everybody today? I'm pretty well. Having my first coffee. I know it's not early morning, but anyway, today we're gonna go through creating Panorama in Photoshop, replacing sky, and moving and removing objects. Okay, Krishnadev says audio is clear. I hope the picture is clear as well. And we have more viewers now. So to create Panorama in Photoshop, it's pretty easy. You can do it in two ways. You can open few pictures and create Panorama from them, or you can just load few pictures and Photoshop will create Panorama automatically from those pictures. I'll show you both ways. Both ways are very similar anyway. So first of all, when you are taking Panorama, when you are planning on creating Panorama in Photoshop, you need to have pictures. Let's say you are standing on the hill and you are taking a few shots of the city or any kind of landscape. Take your camera, take one picture, move it slightly to the right or left, take another picture. So take at least two pictures. You can take more. In today's example, I think one Panorama that I'm gonna create has 5 or 6 pictures and another one has 3. And I have 2 examples because one example is creating Panorama from JPEG images and the other example is creating Panorama from raw images. The system is the same, but the process has one additional step if you are creating Panorama from raw images. So let's do the simpler one first. Let's create Panorama from JPEG images. You can do it in 2 different ways. Let me show you. So let me first switch off my view so you don't see me. You see the whole screen with Photoshop. So we're going to go to File, Open, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images. If you look at the preview here, you can see that I was taking pictures by moving camera slightly to the right. When you are taking JPEG images, camera will do the best job to fix the contrast, the colors, and all of that. So basically, the only thing you have to do is to load all these images in Photoshop, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to select all these images and click Open. And Photoshop will open them in separate tabs. It doesn't matter in which order images are open. When creating Panorama, Photoshop will know where to put which picture. Hi, Jovana. So now when we have all these images open, if you want to create a panorama from them, be careful not to have any other image that doesn't belong to Panorama, because Photoshop might get confused and even crash. It was happening to me. So go to File, click Automate, and choose Photo Merge. So don't choose Merge to HDR Pro. That's a different thing. Photo Merge. And you will get this dialog. You can do a couple of things. You can load images directly from your hard drive, or you can add open files. Since we already opened these images, we're going to click Add Open Files. And the images that we have open here in these separate tabs will load over here. Now you have different options for Panorama. I usually choose Auto, so I let Photoshop decide what is the best option for my panorama. So I usually choose Auto, and I leave this checked blend images together because that's the only way to create panorama. And then I usually choose Vignette Removal, because sometimes when you take photos, especially if you zoom with some DSLRs, with some lenses, you have slightly darker corners of the image, which is called vignette. I check this because this gives the freedom to Photoshop to remove those darker corners, to lighten them up. And then I usually also choose geometric distortion correction. So I choose these three options. If panorama that you are creating doesn't look good after choosing these three options and this one, try other options. Maybe some of them will work better for you, depending on the panorama that you are creating. So now when I clicked these three checkboxes and chose Auto, I'm just gonna click OK. And Photoshop will go through all these images, as you can see, open a new tab, load all these images as separate layers, and try to stitch them together to create a panorama. So let's wait for that. Depending on the number of the images and the size of the images, the process might be slower or faster. But in the end, this is something that you should get. So now we have a new tab. It's called Untitled Panorama number 1. And we have all our images loaded in separate layers with a layer mask. I'll explain to you what that is. But before that, because we don't want to force Photoshop to keep things open that we don't need, I'm just going to go to our original images and close them all, right? So we don't need these images. We just need our file with panorama with layers. So for you who don't know what a layer mask is, let me show you. Now we have only the top layer visible. And here, this thumbnail represents the loaded image. This loaded image, as you can see here on this thumbnail, the loaded image is actually rectangular. It's the original image from my phone. But we attached layer mask to this layer. Layer mask, the purpose of layer mask is to hide some portions of the layer. So everything that's dark or black on the mask will be hidden from this layer. So Photoshop basically took this picture, loaded into this layer right here, and then with the layer mask, the black part of the layer mask, Photoshop hid these parts of the layer. So now we only see the left part of this image because we have the next image attached in the second layer, and Photoshop took those parts from that image and also some additional parts and attached to the layer on the top. So as we go down, we can see how Photoshop actually stitched all these images into one panorama. I hope that's clear. Before we proceed, let me show you how to load images directly and create the same panorama without opening all these files. And I recommend you to do that only with JPEG images because, as I mentioned, with JPEG images, camera does a pretty good job to fix the contrast, fix the colors and all of that. But with raw images, we are usually doing it manually. So when you are creating panorama from raw images, I recommend opening each file, fixing the colors, fixing the contrast and sharpness and all that, and then when you fix that all for all raw images, then you create panorama from them. However, in JPEG files, all that should already be fixed. So we can just literally load JPEG files directly into Panorama module. Let me show you how. Let's say you just open Photoshop, you click File, Automate, and go again to Photo Merge. But now you don't have any files open, right? You have to open them. So click Browse button and select all your images again. Click OK. So the files will be loaded here. Auto is chosen. Vignette removal, geometric distortion correction, and just click OK. And Photoshop will now create panorama without opening all these files separately. It will just create one tab and create panorama from these images. So let's wait for that. While this is happening, I want to invite you guys to join my Facebook group, Stock Photography Helping Community. Find me on Facebook, search for Dreamframer, and you will see the group that I created. And over there, we can discuss anything about stock photography, any problem that you have, rejection reasons, and all kind of stuff. I will actually leave the link to that group in under this video. So now when we have the same situation, we have layers loaded, separate images loaded in the layers, and panorama that we can see on the screen. Now you go and zoom a little. Zoom enough to, well, I zoom to 100%, so this is the number here, 100%. You want to zoom enough to see if Photoshop did a good job stitching images. Sometimes, it rarely happens, but sometimes it does happen that you see broken lines. Let me show you. So this is our first layer. So here where Photoshop stitched these two images, right, along this line, you might see some misalignments. Right now we don't, because Photoshop did a good job. But sometimes you actually can see that the images are not stitched together properly. So inspect your panorama to that, and when you're sure the panorama looks good, you can basically select all these layers, click on the bottom layer or top layer, and then shift, click all of them together, right click on any of them, and say merge layers. So now we have a true panorama image. This is now one layer, it's just one image, and it's created out of 6 images. Now you can see that we have some corners that are empty, which is okay. That's because Photoshop was correcting images geometrically to look natural, right? So let's fix that. First of all, let's make the horizon straight. To do that, I first want to make the horizon like one straight line, because you can kind of see that it's not really I wouldn't say it's not a straight line. It's more like a curve, like an arch. Not this much as my cursor is going, but a little bit, right? So let's fix that. To see what you're doing, click on Windows. No, actually, yes, a View, Show, and Grid. Okay. Now, if your grid is too dense like this, then click Control K or Command K on Mac, and you will open preferences, Photoshop preferences. I believe you can also find them here. Edit, preferences, right? And then say general. Or you can go directly to guides, grid, and slices. It's the same dialog. Control K, and then you have guides, grid, and slices. So let's see where is grid. Grid line every 1 inch, subdivisions 4. We don't need that many subdivisions. And maybe here we'll put 2 inches. Grid line every 2 inches, subdivisions 2. Okay, that's better. Now we can clearly see what we are doing. So let's fix this horizon. Edit, transform, and warp. Okay, now we're gonna grab this middle and fix it like this. Make like a little arch in the opposite direction than before. Just click OK now. Okay, now I can turn off the grid. I don't have to see it anymore. Go to View, Show, and switch it off. That looks better, right? Now, if you're not sure that the horizon is truly horizontal, then click to these 3 dots and show you. If you click on this little, it's like a little triangle here in the corner, you will have more, you can add more tools to the toolbar. I added ruler tool. So if you click ruler and then you click anywhere on the horizon and go stretch it all the way to the other side to be parallel with the horizon, or let's say you have a vertical building, you can also do it vertically. Then you just let go of the mouse button and click straighten layer. Well, this is basically horizontal, so we didn't see any change. But if the horizon is kind of skewed and you go along the horizon and click straighten layer, then you will clearly see how Photoshop rotates the image to make that line that you draw, make it straight. So anyway, we kind of didn't fix really anything, which is good. Now you can go to crop tool, click on it, and get rid of these empty corners here. You can do it in a couple of ways, but since, I mean, we're not losing really anything if we cut off some of the pictures, some of the pixels here, then I'm gonna just freely drag them right and left and crop this image. Make sure to have this checked, delete cropped pixels, because when you do that, Photoshop actually deletes pixels around. But if you don't have that checked, it will look like Photoshop cropped them, but it will Photoshop will actually still keep them in the memory. So if you really think that you don't need these pixels around, just have this checked and click the check mark. Now, I left this on purpose. I'll show you why. Jovana, thank you so much for €2 donation. Thank you very much. So now when you have a panorama like this, since the sky is a pretty simple, it looks pretty simple, right? You can actually, instead of cropping the image more to get rid of these empty pixels, which would basically decrease the size of the image, you can actually add some parts of the sky, right? Because, I mean, if you had, let's say, buildings here and you wanted to do the same on the bottom, instead of deleting the empty part, you want to add some objects there, then you will basically be adding things that don't belong to this landscape, like some new parts of the buildings, and they might not even look good. But if you're just adding the sky, that's not a big deal, right? Sky can look whatever. So let me now, because we have just one layer, let me create a new layer by dragging this one to the empty layer, new layer icon. And now when this layer is active, I'm gonna get spot healing brush tool, increase the size of it, and just drag across this empty part of the image and wait. Photoshop does this sometimes, I don't know why, but sometimes it doesn't cover the whole image, it just leaves it like this. So I honestly don't know how to fix this unless I stretch the sky, so I usually just crop it like this. And there you go, that's your panorama. So this is basically creating panorama from JPEG images. Now when you have this, you can work on the picture as usual. I would usually go to Skylum software, Photolimmer 3, and let Photolimmer adjust the contrast and the colors and all that. For example, so you see the difference. I'm gonna click done. Wait for it for a second. Okay, you see, that's the difference. And then I would most likely create a new layer out of it, just to save this original one. And then I would again go to Filters, Skylum Software, Luminar 2018, and I would try to add some interesting filters to this. For example, Sky Enhancer, to try that one, to darken the sky a little bit. And then I would probably go to Accent AI filter and brighten up the trees more. And then even since we have the sun in the image, I would most likely make that look really intentional by adding sun rays. Let me see, where is that? Oh, sun rays right here. Okay, let me just move this, place the sun center over here, just like that. I think it's a bit like this, more like this. And then let's say the length, the warmth, there you go. Then click apply and wait for Luminar to export the image to Photoshop. And there you go. So that's how we create panorama from JPEG images. Now let me show you quickly how to do it with raw images. I'm not going to save this, I already have that image. So with raw images, I'm going to do this. I'm going to click open, and I have 3 images. As you can see, they are not JPEG, they are .nef, which is raw Nikon format. I will choose all 3 images, click open, and Photoshop will open them in Camera Raw. We have 1, 2, 3 images. Now I'm going to fix all of these images separately. These, if you saw previous webinars, live streams, you know what I'm talking about already. So I'm gonna push the highlights to the left, shadows to the right, whites to the right until we get those little red spots, and then just bring them back a little bit, and blacks until I get these first blue dots here. So that's one image. The second one, the same thing, highlights to the left, shadows to the right. I'm doing this because I already explained that in the previous webinars. If you have any other way to do it, just do it. But what I want to say with this is you should fix your images manually before creating panorama, because Photoshop will just stitch the images without correcting the sharpness, the contrast, and all that. Okay, now I have all 3 images kind of fixed, right? And then I'll click I'll select all of them, open images, wait for Photoshop. It takes a bit longer with raw images. So we have 1, 2, and 3. Right? Now you can go to File. Now it's the same thing. Automate, Photo Merge, Add Open Files, Vignette Removal, Geometric Distortion Correction. Click OK and wait. And Photoshop will create a panorama out of these 3 images that we loaded. As I mentioned, it goes a bit slower with raw images because it's a lot of more information, but you know, it's worth it. Okay, you see now how Photoshop kind of, the image is kind of skewed. So this is a good example. I can show you how to fix the horizon, right? So we have panorama with these 3 layers, and I'm gonna close the original images. We don't need them anymore. Now when you have panorama like this, if you're not happy with this, you can choose those other options that I mentioned before in this dialog here. You can try perspective mode or cylindrical mode, and maybe in that case the image will not be like this, it will be just straight. But I just want to show you how to use the ruler. So let's first merge. Let's say we're happy with this and we want to merge these 3 layers. They're already selected, as you can see they're highlighted. If they're not, just click one, shift click the last one, right click, merge layers. Now we have 1 layer. Now I'm gonna go to the ruler tool and do this. This should be pretty good. If it's not, we can do it again later. Straighten layer. Okay. Now I'm gonna go to Edit, Transform, Warp, and do this. Actually, no. I'm gonna do it a different way. Edit, Transform, Warp, and then I have different options here. Let's try Arc. Oh, that's not good. Let's try this. That's not good either. So no, we have to use Custom. Edit, Transform. You always have to experiment and try different things. Sometimes one thing works better than the other one. There you go. With Warp you can kind of play. There you go. Sometimes you don't have to use Warp. There are other options. Let's say we're happy with this, and now we're gonna go to Crop tool and crop our panorama. There you go. Since not all the buildings are vertical, as you can see, these on the left side are leaning left and these on the right side are leaning right, you can use another transform tool. Transform and then skew, I believe. Do something like this and then crop the image again. Let's say now you're happy with it. Let's patch the sky. Spot healing brush tool. There you go. Now you can do other types of editing. So this was creating panorama with JPEG and raw images. Okay. Let's move to our next subject, which is moving and removing objects in the image. Okay, let's go and open our image. For this, I chose this one. There are many ways to remove or move objects in the image. I'm going to show you the tools that you can use, and you have to experiment with those tools, because if I'm gonna show you all the ways you can do it, that would be like 2 or 3 live streams, just that subject. So let's fix our image as usual. Lift the shadows, increase the white tones, decrease the black tones, increase the contrast, vibrance. Yeah, what I always do, what I forgot to do in that example with Panorama, is click on this lens icon and do this. Okay, we got some white blown out parts here, so let's decrease the whites a little bit. There you go. Let's say we're happy with the image now. Open image. Okay, I want to move this bird to make it look like the bird is landing or flying towards the tree. Let me show you how to do it. First, I'm going to drag this layer to a new layer icon. And then I want to select the bird and copy it into another layer. So this example works good for this image. Sometimes you can just do this. Let me show you. Sometimes you can just do this. Let's say I'm going to get a content aware move tool. Then I'm going to select the bird, with a little bit of sky outside, and I'm going to grab the bird and move it here. And you can also resize it, let's say like this. Okay, so now you see why this doesn't really work for this image. First of all, the bird was too close to the branch, so Photoshop is not sure what is a branch and what is the bird's tail. So we have this part of the tail that's hanging in there. That's okay, we can delete this. But another problem is that now around the bird we have this dark halo. That's because this part of the sky was darker than this one. Yeah, I could have moved the bird over here and that would be totally fine, but this is not the best option for this image, as I mentioned. So I'm gonna go Control Z and undo this and deselect. What I want to do is select just the bird, which I'm going to do with this polygonal lasso tool, for example. So in this way I can do it precisely, and Photoshop will not mess it up. Just like this. And now when the bird is selected, I'm just gonna click Control C, copy, and Control V. And I click Control V or Command V, you will see that Photoshop will create a new layer on top of this with just the bird. Look. So now we have just the bird in this layer. You can also create a new layer manually, and then if you do Control V, the bird will be pasted into that layer, right? But we did it this way. Now, the image looks the same because we have this layer with the bird on top of this layer with the same bird. So basically, you cannot see any change. But if you grab Move tool, and while the top layer is active, you click here, you can actually move this bird to wherever you want. And as I mentioned, I want this bird to fly toward the tree. So while the same layer with the bird is active, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. Okay. Now you can move this bird some other spot. But let's say I want to keep it here. What we have to do now is delete this one. We don't need this bird anymore. So to do that, click on that layer, to make it active, so you don't want to edit anything in this top layer because there is nothing in there, it's just the bird. But if you click the lower layer to become highlighted, you selected that layer. And now let's remove this bird. In this section here, you have all the tools that are good for moving and removing and duplicating stuff on the photo. So this time I'm gonna use a patch tool. Select this bird carefully. You should do this as careful as you can. I'm not gonna lose too much time by zooming now here because we don't have time for that. But if I grab this bird now that's selected with this patch tool, and let's say I move my cursor here and just let it go, this is basically what I did. Now Control D to deselect. We deleted the bird. We have this little artifact here that we can fix easily by using a clone tool, for example. Clone tool, let's decrease the size of it. Click Alt or Option on Mac. Click anywhere where there is a similar background, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing now, but let me just cover this. There you go. Now we don't have a bird anymore. We have this bird over here. So what I did here, any tool that you click gives you the tool options on the top. You see how this is changing. So for the clone tool, I had something else selected that I used before, and I didn't want to use that, so I clicked the normal mode and opacity 100%, and I can show you in the next stream what that means. So now we're not gonna do it because we don't have time, but anyway, we have this bird on top now in the top layer, and we have to blend it with the background. How do we do it? How do we delete this part here that's messing up with the sky? You can clearly see the lines here, so it's not blending well. You can do it in a few different ways. You can go and precisely delete all these parts, which is not the best way. You can add a layer mask like this, and while the mask is selected, you can click the brush tool, the black color here, decrease the size of a brush, and then hide these parts here, which is pretty good but not the best option because you have to be really precise not to cover the bird, right? So we're not gonna do that. I'm gonna show you the best way to do it. For this kind of situation, what you need to do is tell Photoshop to delete, let me just show you this, to delete bright parts of this layer and leave the dark parts. And the easiest way to do that is to use the dodge tool. If you click here, you will have dodge, burn, and sponge tool. The burn tool makes pixels darker, like they're burned, right? The dodge tool does the opposite. It brightens up the pixels. So if you click on the dodge tool and you get these options here for the dodge tool, you can choose to brighten up the shadows, midtones, or highlights. In this case, we want to brighten up the highlights because we want to make this thing around the bird the lighter the possible, the lighter as, how do you say that in English? You have to make them lighter to blend them with the layer underneath. And why is that? It's because if we really want to blend this layer to this one, when you click on this top layer, you will have the options for that layer. And one of the options is the mode, just like the mode here for the clone tool. So let's say now this layer is in normal mode. That means that this layer is just like a regular image. whatever is seen on the layer will be seen here in the screen. However, if we change that mode from normal to darken, that means that only the pixels that are darker in this layer than pixels from this layer will be visible. So this bird is obviously darker than the sky underneath from this layer, and that's why the bird is visible. However, let me go back to normal. You see how this part of the sky from that we like copied along with the bird is actually lighter than the sky on this side from this layer. So this sky around the bird, because it's lighter, if you change the mode to darken, will not be visible. And that's what we want to do. That's why we want to brighten up everything around the bird from this layer, because we set the layer mode to darken. And if you brighten up this pixel, they will not be visible because the sky underneath is darker. So let's use the dodge tool, as I mentioned. Set it to highlights to brighten up the highlights. Set exposure of the tool to 100%. Decrease the size a little bit. And then we can do this. So to show you what I'm exactly doing, I'm going to switch off this layer. So this is what I'm doing. This is our original layer with the bird. I'm basically brightening up just the highlights from that layer. And the bird, as you can see, the bird itself is staying dark because the tool only affects the highlights. So let's do that quickly. Like this, then decrease the size of a brush. There you go. Just like that. Okay, and then inside, like between these two long feathers. So that was pretty quick. You don't really have to be super precise to do it. Now when we switch on the layer underneath, you will see that we can't see any of these bright parts. The bird looks perfectly blended into the sky. So we started with this image. We deleted the bird, we moved it to another layer, and we flipped it over to look like it's flying to the tree, and we set the mode of that layer to darken. If I set it back to normal, you will see that we have a bird with these parts of the sky that are lightened up. But if we set the mode to darken, you will not see those parts. So that's one of the ways how you. This is kind of a more complicated situation. I could have just shown you how to copy this bird to another place, but I wanted to show you also this option with the changing the blend mode. And I did create a couple of videos about blend modes for layers. You can find them on my YouTube channel. So if you want to learn more about blend modes, just go to my YouTube channel and check out those videos about blend modes in Photoshop. Okay, now when we are done with this, we can select all three layers, right click, say merge layers, and then go to our standard procedure when editing photos for stock. I usually use Panorama 3. Okay. And then I would probably use Luminar 2018 to make the image pop even more. So both Photolimmer and Luminar, you can buy them if you use the link in the description of this video. If you do that, you're gonna get, I think, $20 discount. The original price is $69. You can get them for $49, and what's good about it is you basically pay just once, and you have the product that's fully functional. You don't have to pay it on a monthly basis like Adobe products. I still use Adobe because I really like it, and for some things I really prefer Photoshop. But if you are not planning on paying for a subscription every month, Luminar is exactly what you need. It's a fully equipped software for stock photography, so you don't even have to think about Adobe. Let's say here I want to let's say color balance. That's an interesting one. No, actually not color balance, but color contrast. Color contrast. There you go. I will now brighten up the bird a little bit, but let's not lose time doing that. There you go. So that's an example how you move or remove objects from the photo. The last thing would be replacing the sky. Replacing the sky, just like removing and moving objects, really depends on the situation. I chose something that, like, not the simplest scenario, but if I show you the simplest scenario, that will be too simple. You will still not know what to do with other images that are not very similar, but I'll give you a couple of tips. I'll open two images. This is the image with the sky that I want to replace, and this is the sky that I want to put there. So first of all, tip number one, when choosing images where you want to replace the sky, try to match the perspective. For example, I have this image where I can see the horizon, right? You have to find another image. I mean, the best thing would be to find another image that is similar to this one, where you have the horizon visible. If you just choose this part of the sky, let's say the upper part of the sky, this one, and try to replace it to put it here, you will do it, but it will not look natural, because there is a different angle on the clouds when you see them at the horizon and when you see them up here. Because here you're looking underneath, you're underneath the clouds, and these clouds are much more distant. So try to be careful about that. The best way to replace the sky is to find the image that is similar to the image that you're using, because you want the same perspective. So let's say I'm gonna select this image, the whole image. Click Control A or Command A and Control C, and go back to our original image and just click Control V. Photoshop will create a new layer with our image. Okay, I'm gonna switch off the visibility for this image. Hi Snezhana. We still don't need this one. What I want to do is copy this image to a new layer, just because we want to keep the original, and then I'm gonna work in this second layer here. Similar to the situation before, we want to brighten up this sky as much as we can, because we want to replace it with this sky. And the best way to do that is to set this top layer to darken mode, and then brighten up this layer as much as we can, so parts of this layer that are brightened up are not visible, and the parts of the sky that are actually have some contrast and color are visible from this layer. So let's switch off the visibility for this layer again and brighten up this sky here. To do that, I'm gonna use the same tool I used before, Dodge tool. Again, going with highlights, because that's the safest now. We don't want to delete the shadows over here. But let's say if you're not happy with the image, you can also go and edit it, like to brighten up these shadows a little bit. For example, I can do that in Filter, Camera Raw, and let's push the highlights to the left. Let's brighten up the shadows like this, so we can see the bushes now. And This is okay for this example, it's not bad. So I'm gonna click OK. Okay, now we can see some leaves, right? So let's brighten up that sky. While the layer is active, go and click the dodge tool, select highlights, exposure 100%, and let's increase the size of a brush now because it will be too much to work with a small brush on the image like this. Okay, now let's try to do it a bit more precisely. Smaller brush. You can freely go around these bushes because they are not highlights, they are shadows, so they will not be affected by the tool. And I'm gonna leave this because I probably need this sun. Now let's go and try to affect, just do this. Let's try to affect midtones as well, to brighten up the sky as much as we can. So I'm going to change highlights to midtones and brighten this up a little bit more. Decrease the size of the brush. There you go. Sometimes when you use this darken mode and these modes, sometimes the color will go through, so you have to be careful about that and actually desaturate colors from time to time if you don't want the colors to go through that mode and make the image look unnatural. And we might have that situation now, so I can show you that on an example. Okay, we brighten up the sky as much as we could. Now we're gonna turn off this layer, the top layer, and switch its mode to darken. So now you can see basically that we see only the sky from this layer because it's darker than the sky underneath. That's the purpose of this darken mode. But now down there everything is mixed, right? So let's hide parts of this layer that we don't need because we need this landscape down here, right? We don't need where is it? We don't need the road and all that. Okay, so I'm gonna add a layer mask. Click on the mask to activate it. Click on the brush tool, and since we already have black color chosen, I'm going to increase the size of the brush and just paint over the mask. Wherever I paint black, the parts of the layer will be hidden. There you go. Now let's go to this mountain here. Decrease the size of a brush. There you go. Now we can play with this sun a little bit and maybe do this. Something like this. Now that's what I was telling you about. You see how these colors here look unnatural? It's because this layer underneath is too saturated. So it goes through this top layer. To fix that, I have to make this, I have to desaturate this. And how I'm gonna do it? I'm gonna click on the layer that is saturated, that one. Let's hide this top layer so we don't see it. Add a new layer on top of it and change its mode to saturation. And then with the brush tool and white color, I'm gonna paint over here to make it gray. Okay, now let's turn on this layer again. Now this part looks more natural because it's gray like the sky behind, but we want some color around the sun and here. So I'm just gonna use the eraser tool, which is this, and erase that white color that we added to desaturate the layer. Let me show you. So you see this white? I'm gonna erase a little bit of it so we bring back the colors like this. There you go. So that looks pretty natural, right? We have sky from one landscape. We have the saturation layer to fix, just to fix this little area here, and we have our original image. Now when you do this, you can blend these three layers, merge them into one layer, right click, merge layers, and then copy it to a new layer, just in case you want to keep the original one. And now you can proceed with editing. I would usually do photo limmer, as I mentioned before. Let's see how that works. Oh yes, this is another example. Now I noticed it. This is another thing that you can fix with the saturation layer. Sometimes when you have a poor quality image, then when you brighten up the shadows, you get all these nasty purplish and reddish shades. You see, this is kind of more purple and this is more green. That's because JPEG image doesn't contain a lot of information, and when you have areas in the shadows and you brighten them up, all these different colors and noise might come out as a result, and that's not good. So to fix that, I'm going to show you again how the desaturation layer, or not just the saturation, this is more going to be like the hue change. We want to change the hue of all the parts in the bushes to look like this greenish. So let's create a new layer on top of this one, choose the mode for the layer to be hue, and then tell Photoshop what color or what hue to use. So I'm going to use this color dropper, and now the chosen color is white, but I want to choose, let's say, this one. So it's kind of brownish greenish, right? When you choose that, you can get your brush tool and decrease the size of a brush, and now you're going to be painting in your new layer. And when you do that, you see that the hue is changing. This is the original one, reddish one. And what we are doing, we're basically painting or changing the hue in the lower layers by adding the color to the top layer. And that's possible because we changed the mode of this layer to hue. So everything underneath it will be with this changed hue. I hope that's clear. Again, I have detailed videos about layer modes, so you can check that out. And they're pretty long. I mean, also you have to experiment. You have to learn how to use these modes, and once you understand how they work, it becomes very easy. If you know what you want to do in the image, it becomes very easy to do. Okay, that's better. Now we're gonna blend or merge these two layers by selecting both of them. Right click, merge layers, and now we can proceed with editing. So sometimes during the editing you notice that you made a mistake, or let's say you increase the contrast in the sky and suddenly some dark spots show up, and those are lens spots. So if that happens, you have to delete them. Let's wait for Photoshop, and this is our final image. So let's say how we started. We started with this, and the final image is this. So that's it, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be here a couple of minutes more for your questions. Find me on Instagram, type Dreamframer, you'll find me, and then you already know about my YouTube channel. There is a community tab in YouTube channel. I'll be announcing future streams there. Also on my Instagram page and Dreamframer Facebook page as well. So go there, find me, like my page. I will leave the link to the group that I created that should help stock photographers learn, especially new stock photographers, learn how to create and sell images online. Over there we can share ideas, you can ask me questions, I'll answer, and also you can of course send me an email if you want to send me images to check them out if they are rejected or something like that, because I used to be a reviewer, so I know exactly what to look for, and I think I can explain to you what to fix in the image to make it acceptable for stock websites. I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you did, leave a comment, press that like button, and I'll be here a couple of minutes more, as I mentioned, for your questions, and then we'll probably see each other next week or so. No more coffee here. Yeah, I mean, now I just crossed my mind, I can also play with this and again add sun rays or anything in Luminar 2018. Let's say I just want to add sun rays just to see how it looks like. Place sun center over here, switch it off. Warmth, we need it to look warmer. There you go, pretty good. Amount, the amount is good. Number, length, that looks good actually. Can I use Panorama in GIMP? Jovana, I'm not sure. I used GIMP long time ago, probably like 5 years ago. So I'm sure that you can find on YouTube if you can or can't. I'm guessing that you can, because GIMP is really powerful. So GIMP, for those who don't know, GIMP is a free option, free software to edit images, and it's pretty good. So I'm guessing that they already have solution for that in GIMP, but I can't tell you for sure because I don't know. Any other questions, guys? Okay, if not, enjoy your day or your evening, wherever you are, and see you soon. Bye.